I don't want to be the authority, but I'm just going to, my housekeeping is, please be careful of your surroundings, because you are all standing and sitting in the original foundation, and this is 1814. So unless somebody has the recipe for the mortar, we have to be super careful. So that's all my housekeeping. Or if you have to go to the bathroom, the porta potties are up there. Just so you know. My name is Tracy. Some of you may know me from being here previously. I've been here for quite a while. I do look a little different. Normally I have nice long hair and it's tinted purple, but my hair is short. But anyway, thank you guys for coming. I look forward to this day every year because to me, March 31st, not only is it our wonderful Hydesville Day, but it's also the opening of the property. And it's a sign of spring because we will start seeing more and more visitors to the property, which is incredible. So I thank you guys for coming today and supporting this beautiful place, and I hope you keep coming because this is a special place, especially in the summer. It's much nicer in the summer. I'm going to give you just a little bit of history. I could go on and on for about probably 4 to 6 hours talking about the Fox family and the sisters and the property and everything, but I'm just going to kind of stick to the basics. I hope that most of you do know the story of this property. Most of people around here don't know how Hydesville got its name, but we were founded by a gentleman. His name was Dr. Henry Hyde. He actually came here from Vermont, and yes, he was a doctor. He thought he was going to come here and practice medicine. But when he realized how scarce the population was, he came up with a plan B. And his plan B was to build a tavern. And the tavern was located across the road. And that was a great success. But thankfully, with the money that he earned from building his tavern and operating the tavern, he was able to buy up all of the land in the surrounding area. And it became a small hamlet, and it was wonderfully named Hydesville. He went on to buy and build little homes on some of the properties that he had, and this one became the most famous of his properties. The cottage was built, like I said, 1814. And he rented the cottage out to many families. One of the first families that we became aware of that lived here was the Bell family. Mr. and Mrs. Bell lived here. They had a young girl by the name of Lucretia, who her parents lived in the village. Because the schoolhouse was up the road, she needed to go to school. So it was determined that she would stay here with the Bell family. And Monday through Friday, she would help out with chores, whatever they needed her to do, and then go to school. On the weekends, she would go back into the village and see her parents. It was a really good way of getting an education. So we have the Bell family living here, and one day, a peddler, very common in the 1800s, stopped in for some in-home shopping. He was greeted at the door by Mrs. Bell in a very friendly and familiar way. He came in, showed them some of the things that he had in his pack, and Lucretia, not having any money, asked him if he would stop at her family's home within the next few days so that her father could purchase some of the dress that she had picked out. And he agreed. For whatever reason, Mrs. Bell decided that midweek, Lucretia was going to go home. She no longer needed her services, and she was going to take her home, and they left Mr. Bell and the peddler behind. Now, Now, within a few days' time, Mrs. Bell did come back to the Pulver residence, and she did ask Lucretia to come back and stay with them again, and she agreed. On the way back to the cottage, Mrs. Bell was just very chatty and was talking up a storm about these wonderful things that the peddler had left and that they had purchased from him. Lucretia was pretty upset because, as she told Mrs. Bell, well, you know, the peddler never showed up at my father's home, and I never got the things that I wanted. It was later that night that Lucretia had come into the cellar where we are all sitting, and she fell into a large hole. She started screaming, and Mrs. Bell came down and asked her what was wrong, and she said, I fell into this large hole. And Mrs. Bell said, oh, must be the rats have been digging in the cellar. And so she asked her husband to bring in some fill, some dirt, some field stones, and fill in the area where the hole was. It was later that night that Lucretia would start to hear some noises. And when she would talk to Mr. and Mrs. Bell about it, they would just kind of poo-poo it away and tell her that it was a bad dream or she was imagining it. It became quite a recent occurrence that it was happening almost on a nightly basis. They were hearing these rapping noises. And after a while, it started to wear on Lucretia. She actually asked her mother if she could come home early. She didn't want to stay anymore. And the Bells' health started to decline a little bit. And so after Lucretia left, they were here for a little while longer, but then eventually they left the house as well. They actually moved to Loch Berlin. After the Bell family was here, we had the Weekman family here. Michael Weekman and his wife had 2 children. They also had a hired girl that came and stayed with them to help out. And they too, after a while, started hearing the rapping noises. Now, the girls were very young and they would cry out at night because they were afraid. They were feeling cold sensations over their bodies. Furniture was being shaken, and not really knowing what to do or what to think of it, the Weekman family moved out. And once they moved out, they basically, out of sight, out of mind, it was dismissed. In December of 1847, the Fox family moved in. And at the time, the Fox family consisted of John and Margaret. You can see them over there on the board. And their 2 daughters, Margaretta, or Maggie, and Catherine, also known as Kate. And they moved in here, and Mrs. Fox, when she walked through the door, said, I believe this house is haunted. They started hearing the raps almost immediately. We fast forward a little bit here to March 31st. The raps have been going on from December to March. March 31st, Mrs. Fox tells the children, we're gonna go to bed early tonight. Everybody was tired, everybody was worn out. And if we hear those noises, we are not even going to address it. We're not gonna think about it, talk about it, we're just gonna ignore it. Well, you know, if you ignore spirit, what happens? Spirit just keeps knocking. And so that's what happened. And finally, it was Kate who yelled out, Spirit, do as I do. And she snapped her fingers, making 3 noises. And the rapping noises repeated 3 noises. Okay, wow. Now we have Maggie. Maggie's not going to be outdone by her little sister, and she says, Spirit, do as I do. And she claps her hands 3 times, but she doesn't make any sound. And they hear 3 raps in response. And Maggie says, oh, Mother, look, they can hear as well as see. And there it was. Mrs. Fox, I'm sure the whole family was thinking, what did we just do? Oh my goodness, what did we just do? Because back in the 1800s, the Fox family was they were Methodists. They were very devout. They attended church. They were part of the church community. And, at first Mrs. Fox was thinking, this can't be good. This cannot be good. What did we do? And so Mrs. Fox joins in and starts asking questions. And we know from her sworn affidavit that she asked, is this a human making this noise? And there was no response. Is this a spirit making this noise? Give 2 raps. And she heard 2 raps. She was so, I think, just mystified by what was happening. She said, if I call in the neighbors, will you continue rapping? And the answer was yes. And so she sent her husband out, who I'm sure at that point was glad to be out of the house, sent him out to get the neighbors. They called in the neighbors. And it wasn't just any neighbors, these were their friends, they knew these people, and they trusted them. Now the neighbors are thinking, oh, we're gonna get a good laugh out of this, let's see what's going on at the Foxes. But when they came in and they started asking questions, and their questions were answered correctly, they went out and got more neighbors and more people. And we didn't have Facebook back then, we didn't have telephones back then, but yet this little cottage, within 2 days' time, saw 500 people come through, because it was just a wonderful thing. Now, some believed it, some didn't. That's why they came. Curiosity, obviously. Not just wrappings, but the furniture would move, the doors would open. And for a while when this was going on, I think Mr. and Mrs. Fox were thinking that, at one time it was the shoemaker, tapping late at night. They thought maybe somebody was knocking on the window, but whenever they would look, there was nothing there. There was no one at the door, no one at the window. And actually, Kate Fox said, I know what's going on. Tomorrow's April Fool's Day. Someone's trying to fool us. But no one was trying to fool them. We know that the girls were separated. Maggie went up the road to her brother David's house, and Lee was called in from Rochester, and she had Katie go back with her. Now, once Kate was settled in with Lee, that's when the rapping started up there as well. And we know back at David's house with Maggie, the rapping was going on there as well. And so eventually Mrs. Fox thought, I've just got to get my girls back together. And her and Maggie made the trip up to Rochester. And from there, it just grew and grew and grew, because here in a small hamlet, we can start things. But when you move to the big city, that's when things really happen. But that's basically the story. We know they went on to become great mediums. Yes, their life had some sadness. Yes, their life had a lot of trials and tribulation. But through it all, they persevered. They kept their eye on the prize. They knew they had a gift. Spirit spoke through them, and they spoke for Spirit. And I'm glad they did. And it wasn't just them. I often think that the peddler obviously deserves a lot of respect. He was the one who broke through. He was the one who kept trying. He tried with the Weekman family. Maybe the girls were just too young. Maybe no one understood. But thanks to Kate and Maggie for listening, for entertaining. Maybe it started out as, oh, we're going to see what happens here. But look where they went. Look what they've done. Look what we have. And for that, I am forever grateful. I know everybody has a lot of questions. That was my quick summary, fastest I've ever done it. Seriously. I know people wonder about the cottage. After the girls took off and went on their world tour and did the wonderful things that they did, you know, they did have, Kate had family. Maggie was secretly married. Her wonderful Arctic explorers family did not approve of her, so as far as they were concerned, she did not exist. But Kate was able to marry a wonderful man and have children, and go on from there. Same with Lee. She had her daughter and her family. But back here in Hydesville, you know, the cottage kind of just sat here. It was empty. It became known as the spook house. People would come in on boat through the Erie Canal, and you know, the carriage driver would say, "Oh, you want to see the old spook house? Let's go." You know, so it kind of picked up that name. We know that in 1916 there was a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Franklin Bartlett, and he was from Pennsylvania. He wanted to purchase the property, but at the time, Dr. Hyde's son, Artemis, didn't want to part with it. And so he asked, "Can I buy the house?" And he said yes. It sounds funny now, because what are you gonna do with it? You know, we buy a house, we move in. This guy bought the house and said, "Okay, great, I'm moving it. I'm gonna move it." And he did. They took the house apart, board by board. They took the windows out the door, the hardware, everything, and they loaded it on a barge, and they took it all the way to Buffalo. And then from Buffalo, they took it to Lilydale. And in Lilydale, they restored it. They put it back together. It was a beautiful, renewed cottage. Sadly, there was a fire, and the cottage burned to the ground. Back here, we were left with the foundation. And we all know every good home needs a good foundation. Well, here we are, right? Spiritualism. Here's the foundation. I think that's very symbolic. So back here, we have a gentleman by the name of John Drummond. Mr. Drummond was from Canada. And back then, if you wanted to come over here in America, you had to become a citizen. And so he came here initially on a visit, right to the property, and he said, "I'm never leaving. This is what I was called to do. This is what I'm gonna do." And he went out and he found period wood and hardware and windows and doors, and he built an exact replica of the cottage. Not only did he build it, he lived in it. And if you were lucky enough to live around here in our town, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, like I was in the 80s, you get to meet Mr. Drummond. He was pretty cool. He was eccentric. The first time you met him, you would think, "Ooh, this guy's off his rocker," but he really wasn't. He was very cool. They say that when he was working, he did some repair work and added some things to the back of the foundation, but he was very small. He was about 5 feet tall. And they say that he would mix the mortar in one hand and hold the boulders in the other. And he was a pretty special guy, but he believed in spiritualism. He believed in the property, and that's why he did what he did. His door was always open. It didn't matter what time you came here. You could come at 5 in the morning. You could come at 2 in the morning, and he would welcome you into his home. Sadly for Mr. Drummond, in 1990, he was putting a log into his wood stove, and a spark flew out and started part of the cottage on fire. The response was quick. There was some smoke and water damage. Unfortunately, he had been burned in the process. But as they were putting him in the back of the ambulance, the neighbor said, he yelled out, "I'll be back, I'll rebuild." And he was in the process of rebuilding when he passed his spirit. And he was 92 when he passed. Mr. Drummond is buried on the property. Didn't know that, did you? Some of us knew that. that. His wife is also here as well. And then after that, sadly, the property just sat and sat, and the house sat. And, you know, I've had people say to me that were here on the day when the town did the controlled burn that it could have been saved. They could have saved it. But unfortunately, I think the people that owned it didn't know what to do with it. The town didn't know what to do with it. Were a little scared of whatever. So they did the controlled burn. And then it just kind of sat quiet up here for a very long time. And if you look across the street, when Cozy said there were weeds this tall, she wasn't kidding, because that's what it looked like. It was very overgrown. And you know, maybe Spirit had a reason, because nobody knew that the foundation was here. Nobody knew that, you know, these pieces of slate that you see were protecting the wall back here, which was a good thing. And then thankfully, Cozy Yay. And I wasn't here on that day. I missed seeing her stand on the giant wall with the stone. That would have been cool. But I do remember them pulling the cornerstone off of the property because it was winter. And it was my husband and his brother and a couple other people, and they put it on a sled and dragged it to the truck. I do remember that. And then, you know, it was quiet for a little while. It was quiet. And then one day, the plans were made. Clear the land, excavate, open, find the foundation of the house. And then they needed a caretaker. And boy, my stars aligned. They aligned because we had the cornerstone, the monument outside was being stored at my husband's business at the time. He owned a monument business. And he met Cozy, and she said, we're looking for somebody to take care of the property. And he said, boy, do I know somebody. And he came home, and oh, let me tell you, I was just like, what's her number? Where is she? I want to do this. And, you know, at first, it was very quiet. You know, we didn't really announce too much. It was just, I would come out and I would literally mow the dirt. There was a lot of dirt. And I would jump in the creek and I'd wash off and then go home and take a shower. And then the next year would come and there would be more grass and it would be less dirt and it was awesome. But I'd still jump in the creek and then go home and take a shower. And then, I don't know, like the property has just evolved so much. And there's always been this big plan for the property. And I can't tell you how amazing it is to see it develop over so many years. And then all of a sudden, you know, the village is more involved and people are coming out and the word gets spread and, you know, it's not this mysterious, scary place that we don't know anything about. They didn't understand the magic. And I gotta tell you, some days it takes me an hour and a half to mow, some days it takes me 2.5 hours to mow. There's been days when it takes me all day to mow because people stop in. They wanna see what's going on or what's in there, what's happening here. And just like Mr. Drummond, if I'm here, I am happy to sit down and tell you, and I will keep you here for hours. I have no problem doing that. And then I'll jump back on my mower and finish mowing, but it's an amazing place, and I know it's cold today, but I have to tell you, if you were to come here in August, we would not be able to sit in here. It would be about 150 degrees. So it's a good thing we're here today. So just keep that in mind. Come back in the summer and appreciate it. So yeah, big plans for this place. And I hope everybody is a part of it and that, you know, you continue to support it because this is, not only is it a very important part of history, but it's it's just a magical place, and we don't want it to slip away, ever. Ever. I thank you guys for coming out. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yes.
Maybe share some of memories there.
I sure can. So, I think when people come in here, they get a little confused because all you see is the foundation. And when you step in, a lot of people think, oh, this is where like the parlor was, or that's where the kitchen was. Possibly. We don't really have a lot of photographs of the inside. But what we are sitting on in here is actual fill. So we're up about 4 feet. I think it's gotta be at least 4 feet, if not more. So we are in the basement, we're in the cellar. Now, when you walk into the cellar and you see this wall here, you just think this is it. That's the end of the house, that's the end of the basement. In reality, there's an extra space back here. So they call this the false wall. This is where the peddler was buried, right behind me. I know some people come in and go, oh, there was a cistern. No, we just built it. But this is where he was buried. And I know this is going to sound really weird. I don't know if I told you my theory before. I don't know. I was in here, it was probably like 10 years ago. And I was just sitting here, and this is, in case anybody doesn't know, this is my healing bench. So we had a spiritualist church here in Newark, and this was my bench. And when our pastor retired, this came with me. I got to bring it, and I thought, I'm bringing it here because what a better place. Don't mind the trains or, the noise going through, but when you zone in, you don't hear it. So I was in here one day and I was just sitting here and I got to thinking, I know what the peddler told the Fox family, that, he had been murdered by Mr. Bell, so to speak. We don't know for sure, but we can assume. And that his throat had been slit. But what if he didn't die right away? What if he got buried in that wall and wanted to get out or let someone know he was there? What if he picked up a rock? And I thought, is that why it's red? Could he have been grabbing to let someone know I'm here? And then it manifested itself. That's just my theory. I don't know. Maybe someday he'll tell us. I don't know. But it was just one of those things where you've done something 1,000 times, and all of a sudden I was like, what if? What if? And it was just a strange feeling. I've had strange things happen in here, I have to tell you. The girls, I've heard Kate and Maggie laughing. I've heard crying. I have asked them for help when I've had weird green rooty things fly or grow up in the middle of 4 feet of fill. And I've walked in here and said, all right, girls, you gotta help me out here. Help me out. And then they're gone. I've come in and I've raked or swept or done something, been interrupted and had to go, so I put them away, come back the next day, my rake will be out. I think that's Mr. Drummond saying, you didn't finish the job. When our little church closed here in Newark, it was a really sad time for a lot of people, and I was very close to our pastor. And I just remember coming in here and thinking, is this it? I mean, is this how it goes? Like, churches close down and you lose people that you love, and now what am I gonna do? Where am I gonna go? How do I practice this beautiful religion that I have embraced? I just need a sign. And I remember thinking that. And the next day I had visited our pastor and I told her, I said, I just went in and I said, give me a sign because maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. Maybe there's a different path I should be on. And she just looked at me and she laughed and she said, if a brick falls on your head, are you going to look at it as a sign or are you just going to be like, ouch, that hurt and walk away? And she said, you don't need a sign. And I said, you're right, I don't. I know what I'm doing. And I came back in here and I was walking around the foundation looking for those green things, even though I trusted the girls to take care of them. And if you guys look over on the foundation, there's a yellow rope that goes across the little step there. If you look very carefully, I believe it's in the top right-hand corner, there's little tiny rocks. And it spells out the letter K. And I saw that. And for a moment I thought, did I do that? did I do that? And then I thought, okay, somebody's got to be playing a trick on me. There's no way. And I took it two ways. One, everything's going to be okay. Okay. And second, I felt like Kate Fox was here and she was with me saying, I got this. It's good. You're doing what you're supposed to do. And I remember calling my husband and saying, you gotta come down here, you gotta see this. And I had one of those new cell phones and took a picture of it and he came down and he came in and he said, well, who would have come in and done that? Who else has a key? And I said, I don't think anybody else in New York has a key but me. And I didn't think Cozy was around. So, it was kind of a validation to me. Did I get my sign? Yeah, I guess so. Did I need it? Not really. I knew in my heart. It was kind of nice to know. And then my husband thought he was smart. He made like a smiley face over here with the rocks. And he's like, oh, look at this. I'm like, get out of here. You're out. Yeah, exactly. But, it's really interesting because the signs are here. No matter what I'm doing. You hear things, you see things. I've had people call me and say, I just saw somebody inside the enclosure. And I'm like, no, it's locked. What did he look like? What did she look like? He was wearing a white t-shirt, brown pants. That was Mr. Drummond's signature outfit. A white t-shirt and khaki pants. And I would just be like, I know who it is, don't worry, it's good. Very interesting, so thank you for indulging. Yes.
I understood that when all this happened in 1847, 48, that digging was done in this part.
Yes.
They didn't find the pepper.
No.
So, and it wasn't found until about 50 years later. So what was the catalyst? What was the thing that made them dig again, find that they would find something?
They did.
They did?
Yes. So they started digging in April. But because this was considered low ground at the time, they got down to about 2 or 3 feet and then the water would just start filling in. They did try again in the summertime.
So that's two or three feet below the fall.
Yes, yep. So then they started digging again in the summertime, and that's when they found some human hair. They found like crockery and charcoal. They found some quicklime, and then they just stopped. And pieces of skull, yes. But then in 1904, there were school children playing in here. And one of the children fell into the wall that was crumbling. And that's when the path and some of his bones were revealed. Yes.
I have to say, myself, people of us from the Louisiana Church, came here about 4 years ago in the summer. Elijah was it was hot, like you said. And while you were giving your talk, I remember hearing a fairly loud rap come from up in that corner. And that was just a sound.
Yep. You hear it that very often, and, you know, it sounds like somebody's tapping on the window or tossing a rock. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I can come in here and it's very quiet. It's, you know, there's really nothing. And then other times you hear the laughter, you know, you just feel like, ooh, something magical happened here. This is wonderful. I don't know, there's just something about this place, and honestly, I turned 55 on March 28th. I'm an Aries, and I love it. Thank you. I always say I can't drive 55. I am 55. You know, there was just something about this place. And I was telling people earlier, most teenage girls, we would skip school and we'd go to the mall. Not me and my girlfriend. Nope, my best friend. Her name was Tracy too. And we would come. And if we got to see Mr. Drummond, then that was a cool day. Because he was just an amazing person, and if you just listened to him, he knew a lot of things about a lot of things, and you knew he loved religion. It wasn't just spiritualism, he loved all religions, and felt that they all needed to be celebrated, but his specialty was spiritualism and the Fox Sisters, and he was amazing. But this is where we came. And even when I got older and I have a family and the place, you know, it was a mess, I always came here. And it's kind of weird to say that when I'm mowing, I am at peace. It is the most peaceful feeling, just riding on a loud tractor back and forth. I don't even listen to music sometimes. The music's in my head. There's just something about this place. It's home. It's always been home. And that may sound strange to some people, but this is home to me. And I'm thankful that I only live less than a half a mile away. Because sometimes, you know, when you're having a bad day, this is where I come. This is where I come. And sometimes it's just a quick walk down to the creek or just around the property. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. About a square.
Do you remember when you were cleaning the Chuck Creek?
Mm-hmm.
So you and your daughter,
Yes, Ramsey.
you found some,
Plates and bowls.
they have a small, dog's foot.
Could you speak up a bit?
Oh, yeah.
Could you-
Can you repeat what she was saying?
Well, you know that stuff.
So when we were doing the excavating, can I say what you told me?
Yeah.
Cozy said, if you find any bones, don't say anything.
Everything would have had to stop.
Because we didn't want the sheriffs out here to stop everything. Yeah, that was a fun period, but yeah, you know, we were digging around, obviously, and I think my daughter was like 13, 14 at the time, and this was a really cool thing for her to come and be a part of, and we were finding, you know, like pieces of glass and pottery and dishes and things like that, and Cozy actually found this doll foot, like a old porcelain doll foot, which was really interesting to me because when they did the controlled burn, Mr. Drummond had a massive library on the second floor of the house. The town did not give very much notice. They basically said, we're doing a controlled burn, this is when it's gonna happen, done. We came out and tried to get some of the material that was up there, and we took it up to the schoolhouse because he was also up at the schoolhouse, didn't own it, but was turning it into an apartment, and he was, you know, a great guy. But while we were up there, we found this round doll head that looked like it was made out of a rock. Where it is today, I have no clue. I know where the materials are. They're actually behind a chimney in a house I used to live in, and I have to work up the courage to go ask these people, like, would you mind if I just went upstairs for a minute to see if there's still here?
Is it the same place the book is at?
Yes, the book, yes, so, but yeah, I mean, we found some very interesting things. I actually found a skeleton key that I believe was the key to the front door. It just mysteriously, popped out one day when we were doing some excavating out front. I was digging in the flower bed and around the well. One of the other things that we have, we know that the original house was moved to Lilydale, and then there was the fire, and none of the house survived. Well, I am happy to tell you guys that, yes, one board from the house, the original house, has survived. And it was because of two young girls who actually lived on my road, on Sand Hill Road. They were probably 11 and 13 at the time. This was 1916. They heard that the old spook house was being taken apart, and they rode their bikes down here. And one of the girls took a board from the house, the pile, and they took it home, they wrapped it up, they wrote a note on the back that said, "From the house in Hydesville, 1916, and put it away." And they grew up, they got married, they lived on our road. When they passed away, their great niece was going through this dresser that had gone through the family. And she found this bundle and she unwrapped it, she saw the note, she saw the board, and she called me. And she said, "I have something that belongs to you."
Oh,
And she brought it here, and it's here. It is here. So, hi, Sue. Hi. Sue, do you mind? I don't want to give you away, but Sue back here by the doorway. Hi, Emily. She lives in David Fox's house. Yeah, so David Fox's house survives. It's a beautiful home, absolutely gorgeous. You guys have been there for a long time. Yes, absolutely.
Well, 41 for me, again, we're born in the house. So it's been in our family for 70 plus years.
Yeah, it is. And I got lucky enough to, go in and walk around and got to go in the basement. Yeah. Yeah, Sue and I actually we walked the property a little bit because I'm pretty sure I found all of the family members as far as where their resting places are, but not John Fox. And all the material that I found and all the records indicate that he was buried in Arcadia. Well, this is Arcadia. I think he was buried on the property because that's where his home was, down at the bottom by the road, because he built his house on David's property. So I think he's out there somewhere. We just don't know where, but when he's ready, he'll let us know and we'll say hello. Yes.
So what's the layout of the house? Is this the front door?
Yep, so the front door faced the road. If you look at the dollhouse is a really close, a very close, little mock-up of the original house. So,
What's the way you would think that?
Dale Wright. Yes. She made the dollhouse. Yeah, it's really cute. Now this back part here, that was added by Mr. Drummond. He did that. Yeah, it was a surprise.
So the house ended here then?
Yeah, it would have been closed off. I think he wanted easy access to the basement, and that's why he built. There was also a side door that he had put on, because I remember we would come in through the side. And a lot of people don't realize, during the 1800s, somebody had spoke on it earlier, that there was a lot going on with the Civil War and the women's movement, but also the Erie Canal was coming through. Now the Erie Canal by all rights, when they put the surveyor stakes out originally, would have been right where Hydesville Road is. That's where the stakes were. But the farmers of Hydesville said, we don't want this. To them, they thought it was gonna be a frog pond, stagnant body of water. It was gonna ruin the community, it was gonna ruin the farming. And so one night, they went out and they picked up all the stakes and moved them south. Yeah, not a good decision. I mean, it's good now because we have Newark, but unfortunately for Hydesville, we became a hamlet, we were a hamlet that became a road. So that's why, this is important. This is an important piece of history, this little corner of ours.
When did Hydesville disappear and become Newark or something?
I'm not really sure the exact dates. I'm not really sure, I'd have to look. I think it kind of got absorbed because we also had, down the road, we had it was called Slab City, that also got absorbed because of the mills that we had. Up here, we had Whiting's Corners, so it just kind of all became absorbed. At one time, we were actually part of Cottage, New York, which is closer to the lake. So it had to be about, I have no clue.
It's in that newspaper article. I think it's in there, the historian at the time of, 1996, yeah, that's who it was.
He would have.
Yeah, I think he wrote it in that article.
Yeah. I can,
When the cottage original cottage was moved to Lilydale, there eventually was a medium that lived there, her name was Flo Cadtrell, and she was a rapping medium. Interviewers came from Movie Town News at the time, so this had to have been in the 30s or 40s, something like that. They came to interview her, and you can find that Movie Town News interview. That would be awesome, let me know.
we had a lot of movie people come out. They did a play, does anybody remember the play, The House in Hydesville? There was a production team that came out, and the night that it debuted up in Rochester, all the lights on the outside blew. Every single light bulb blew. And I remember coming down here and hearing like this sad weeping noise, and I thought, what is going on? And my husband and I had gone up to see the play because I was curious. And it was really dark. I mean, they started to tell the story, but it was just so dark and gloomy. And at the end of it, they show one of the Fox sisters with her hands behind her back and an apple on a string, dropping it on the floor. And at the very end, the play is over and we're just sitting there, and my husband, God love him, stands up and says, if you want to know the real story, ask my wife, she's the caretaker. And I just saw it, I was just like, oh my gosh. Because at that time, I was still like, shh, no. But then, it gets to be the point where, you realize how important this place is and how important our history is. And, everybody, if you didn't notice, we do have a historical marker out front. When I joined the Historical Society in Newark, Chris Davis is the director, and he was wonderful. And Dave Stiles was the president at the time, and they were amazing because they said, pick 5 places where we want historical markers. And they all looked at me, and I was like, please. And poor Dave was like, yeah, we're gonna do this. And it had to be very specific. and it couldn't be suggestive. You had to use facts and, all this other stuff, and only so many characters and so many lines, and I thought, how am I gonna do this? I can't even do a talk in an hour, let alone, 15 lines on a sign. And it would come back and he'd say, nope, you gotta edit it out, and I'd do it again, and he'd send it back, nope, different, change it. But that's finally what we came up with, and the sign came in October, and I said, he called me and he said, oh, we got our sign, it's in, and we're gonna put it in the spring. And I'm like, no, you're not. He's like, what? I said, no, you're not. You're gonna meet me out there right now. I'm gonna have a hole digger and cement, and we're putting the sign in. And you know what? He's a great guy, and he was like, okay. And he came out, and we dug the hole, and he did the cement, and we put the sign up, and I was just like, you have no idea how much this means, not only to me, but to everybody. There's no more hiding, there's no more darkness, this is light and this is good, and these women needed to be recognized, and we are, so, yeah. Yeah. And I know Emily Howard is here. Unfortunately, Jonathan Taylor, our mayor, was detained, I think, in Hamburg or somewhere, he told me. So Emily got elected to come. Volunteer, yay. Well, when he told me it was you, I was like, yes. But she's actually going to deliver the proclamation for us, which is a huge deal, guys. Huge deal. So.
And I'm pleased to be here today to deliver this proclamation from the Village of Newark. I think it's especially interesting to have this be the last day of Women's History Month and be here acknowledging women that are historically right here in our backyard. I grew up here in Newark, and I remember learning about Fox Sisters in 4th grade. And I'm a school teacher now, and we actually talked about it in our English class in high school as well. I think it's an important part. I think it's fascinating that we are surrounded by so much history right here in this area in New York State. So I am pleased and happy to be here to deliver this proclamation. So on behalf of the Village of Newark, whereas on March 31st, 1848, 2 young girls by the name of Maggie, and Catherine Kate Fox communicated with the spirit of a peddler buried in the walls of this property of 1510 Hydesville Road. This became known as the advent of modern spiritualism. Spiritualists from all over the world traveled to this site to celebrate modern spiritualism on this day, known as Hydesville Day. Now, therefore, be it resolved that on this day, March 31st, 2023, and every March 31 thereafter, be proclaimed as Hydesville Day by the Village of Newark. And that's signed by our mayor, Jonathan Taylor. Congratulations. Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's what I think I can listen to.
Yeah. I know, this is huge, this is what we wanted. This is a big dream. This is awesome. Look at this, guys. I
We want us to have a photo op.
I know. Yay. Yes.
Well, that's a lot of hard work.
Well,
Thank you,
well
Tracy.